Okay, are you all seeing a slideshow? Great. I should just point out before I start, because I haven't said this previously, I am on maternity leave. So I know a few people have been getting in touch with me in between some of these workshops, and I'm not very responsive at the moment. So sorry about that. I'm sort of coming back into work to do these workshops, and then I'm on maternity leave. So bear with me if you've been in touch. I will get back to you at some point in the coming months. Great, there we are. So, oh dear, we're going the wrong way. Thanks everyone for coming to join us again today. I'm just going to share a couple of slides at the beginning that I've shared for the last 2 workshops. So if you've been with us the whole way through, they might be repeating themselves, but for anyone who's joining us for the first time, I think it's really useful to have that background. So today, this is our 3rd workshop in this series. And as Aaron has introduced, we're going to be looking at the evidence for Africa-wide phenology monitoring and how we should go about that. But just before we do that, if anyone here is coming to this topic for the first time, it would just be a reminder that when we talk about phenology, we're talking about the recurring life cycle events that happen in the natural world, whether that's insects emerging, leafing in plants, flowering, fruiting, these kind of things that happen seasonally and are really interconnected within ecosystems. And the reason that they're really interesting is because they're often cued by climate. So seasonal climatic changes often cue these events, but the consequences can be really complex as they cascade through ecosystems. So we're obviously interested in this for 2 reasons. One is as an indicator of the impacts of climate change on natural systems. Phenology is one of the top ways that we can monitor the impacts of climate change in real time, because it impacts things within the real time that we can observe. But we're also interested in what the impacts of climate change will be further down kind of food chains and further down ecosystem impacts. And we've recently showed in our own research, this is research that I helped lead from Lope National Park in Gabon in Central Africa, and just in very brief showing that we have this long-term phenology record of tropical forest tree species going back since the early 1980s, and we've shown a massive decline in fruit production across many tree species at the national park. And obviously we're very concerned about the impacts of this for the frugivores that depend on fruits in this national park, and for the people that depend on fruits, both for cultural importance, for food, and for enterprise. So that's an example of why this is so important. And to successfully adapt to the climate changes that are coming to the African continent, it's really important that policymakers have this information so that they can prepare people so that people don't suffer from the impacts of climate change, but also be armed at negotiations like the future COP26 coming up as to why climate change is going to be impacting their own countries. So we need to provide policymakers with the right evidence and the right information. So that's where the African Phenology Network comes in. There are phenology networks throughout the world, but currently Africa, well, before we started this, Africa didn't have one. But there are phenology research programs throughout the African continent, and this map just shows a few of the sites that are registered with us, but there are many, many more out there. And some of these have been running for quite a long time. Most of these are to do with plant phenology, but obviously if you branch out into animal breeding phenology or migration phenology, there's a huge amount of work that's been done over many years, but it's not necessarily connected, and there isn't like a standardized protocol currently for how to collect this kind of data so that we can do international studies across the continent. But if you're not already following us, you can find us on Twitter, and we have our website. You can just Google African Phenology Network .online and you'll find us. And we have a mailing list as well that we'll give information about at the end that you'd be really welcome to sign up to. So, okay, just the main aims of the network are supporting research collaborations. So this is trying to get funding together and come up with new research ideas that we can collaborate on between our individual research sites. Widening access and establishing new methods. So we're going to be talking about that quite a lot today. So we're going through a learning process at the moment to try and use technology in phenology data collection in the field, and we're all learning how to do that together. Growing new leadership. So we've recently established a steering group made up of early career researchers, all of whom are on the call today. And it's really great to have an opportunity for all of us to you know, to be the PIs on projects and to lead research collaborations going forward. And finally, you know, the ultimate aim of what we're trying to do with the research through this network is to support a thriving planet for people, plants, and animals. And we're all very concerned about the impacts of accelerating climate change on African ecosystems. So currently, we're right in the middle of our first ever funded project as a network. So we were awarded some money from the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And this project is just 6 months long. It started in May, June time, and ends at COP26. So it's a project leading up to COP26. And the aim of this fund is to support north to south knowledge transfers and to aid climate adaptation. And what we proposed as part of this project is a rapid assessment of phenological monitoring capacity to aid climate adaptation within sub-Saharan Africa. So how we are doing that is through we've got an online survey to assess capacity for monitoring, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. We had some funding to actually buy some equipment. So we've bought some time-lapse cameras that we can start using in the field as phenocams to record phenology data. We're also piloting using mobile data forms in the field, and we've run this series of workshops to share the knowledge that we are gaining together and to aid discussion amongst the wider community. And we're aiming to write up the conclusions that we come to as a group into a policy briefing that we can share with policymakers of the Africa delegation at COP26. So, right, so workshop one, if you were with us back then, 2.5 months ago, we started off by introducing kind of the state of play with phenology monitoring at the moment in Africa. So we just heard from 3 different research sites that are all at very different stages of research development. So we heard from Lope National Park, where I've been doing research, which has phenology data going back 34 years now, and is one of the longest data collections of its kind in the tropics. And then we heard from 2 newer research programs, one in Kenya, actually looking at agroforestry, so not a really modified system, looking at genetic trials of clonal trials of agroforestry trees, and how knowledge of the phenology of their flowering and fruiting can really aid agroforestry development. And we heard from Bismark in Ghana using new technologies such as mobile data forms for studying liana ecology in Ghana. And at the last workshop last month, we took a different perspective. So we looked outside of Africa to see where we could learn lessons internationally. And we heard from Geeta Ramaswamy of India's Season Watch. And we heard from Teresa Crimmins from the USA's National Phenology Network. And I'm sure if you were with us then, you'd agree it was a really rich discussion. It was really good to learn from these more developed research initiatives so that we can kind of jump ahead and not make some of the same mistakes, or we can be aware of things that can be challenging, and hopefully we can collaborate with these folks going forward. So we'll definitely be if you missed any of these, they're on YouTube, so you can go back and watch any of these workshops on our YouTube. So finally today, this is our first event where we're starting to look at the evidence that we've been collating as part of this project. So the project itself is I'm based at the Botanic Garden, and we've been getting advice from colleagues at the University of Stirling and UNESCO, Sao Paulo's university, on the use of automatic cameras for phenology data collection. And we have been starting to trial some of these methods, like I said, at the 3 research sites that we heard from in the very first workshop. So that's with our colleagues in the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, with Bismark in Ghana, and I've not written down the name of your university, Bismark, so you're going to have to, if he's here, remind me of it. I've had a mind blank suddenly, but here is the logo, and I'll get it in a minute by the end. And the the Agency for National Parks in Gabon. So just quickly before I pass over in a minute to Bismark himself, one of the main aims of this project was we wanted to have a really broad evidence base for the best way to go forward with phenology monitoring in the African continent that would be culturally appropriate, practically appropriate, it's a way that's going to be successful, that is not going to be coming up with a method that can't be used widely because people can't access the equipment necessarily, or is overly reliant on internet access when we're working in remote field sites. You're just thinking about all of these kind of things, and so we really wanted to take a broad survey of people who are familiar with ecological fieldwork and phenology fieldwork in sub-Saharan Africa, and ask them what they thought about how the best way to go forward with phenology monitoring and what the main barriers to moving forward are. And we were hoping to have a sort of snowball sampling technique where we would send this out to our networks, and then people would send this forward to their own networks. And we set ourselves a very low benchmark of trying to get at least 30 responses. And unfortunately, after I think 6 weeks at least of the survey being out, we're currently only at 19 responses. So that's going to be my first ask of the day, is for you to all be thinking about how do we get better access to the people that we want to talk to about this. We are only a small network ourselves, and we're only just starting out, so our reach isn't very big. So and asking people to fill in a 15-minute survey is quite a big ask. So yeah, please be mulling over that in your head, how we can get sort of more participation in the survey. But just to give you a very brief sort of overview so far of what we found, mostly the people that have participated in the survey are academic researchers themselves. We were really hoping to tap into both academic and non-academic networks. So we were hoping to speak directly to some policymakers or NGOs. So that would be really helpful. If you've got any links there that you think you might be able to share this survey with, that would be really helpful. So of the academic researchers, their background is mostly in biological sciences, mostly have a master's or beyond, mostly doctorate level. And in terms of their own nationality, while we had a couple of Europeans participate, we've had a fairly nice mix, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 African nationals have participated. Different African nations have participated so far, so that's good. We're not just hearing from one country, but there are obviously many more countries that we could be hearing from. So again, if you have any networks in countries outside of these, then it would be really great to hear from you. And these academic researchers were mostly involved in forestry research, so tropical forest ecology. So that's the kind of bias of our sample so far. And when we asked a number of questions, and I'm just going to pick out a couple here, but we asked who should be responsible for phenology monitoring, and most people felt it should be researchers and international networks as opposed to, say, government, which is quite an interesting result, because we felt like it could have gone the other way, but maybe that's a bias towards who we were asking. And we asked people to rank what were the biggest barriers to phenology, to rolling out phenology monitoring across the African continent, and funding and logistical constraints were ranked as the top barriers for most people. And I think as we go through the rest of this workshop, I think that will probably be reinforced by our own experience in the last couple of months. But interestingly, people already off their own back suggested that lack of standardized monitoring, so not really knowing what protocols to follow, and poor technical support across the continent also hindered growth of this research. And I can see some of that coming up as well in our own experience. Certainly, we're having to learn a lot together about the new methods that we're using. Right, and then finally from the survey, I thought this was quite interesting. We asked people to say, of the following phenology methods, which ones have you heard of? That's the top bar chart. And from left to right, it's direct canopy observations, automatic cameras, litter traps, flux towers, remote sensing using satellites, remote sensing using drones, agricultural records. And, you know, pretty much, you know, half of all the participants had heard of every single one of these methods. But if you look at the bottom graph, this is actually phenology field methods that you have used or had direct experience of. So we already know that direct canopy observations are the most common phenology field method amongst African field sites. I think there's many reasons for that. Culturally, it was the preferred method of the anthropologists and primate ecologists who often started phenology research on the continent. But also it is a very you don't need specialist equipment to do it. So any of us could go and start doing this method with just a piece of paper and a pencil and hopefully a pair of binoculars. So that is a really accessible method. But I just thought it was interesting to point out how in the orange, that's automatic cameras. So fewer than a quarter of the participants had ever used automatic cameras. And this third one in the red, flux towers, no one had direct experience of using flux towers. And in the brown, very few people had experience doing phenology monitoring using remote sensing with drones. And really, these three are the most expensive and technically complex field methods that are available at the moment. And I just think this is really good evidence for us as to why what we're trying to achieve with this network is to bring the funding and the peer-to-peer support that we can make these field methods accessible within amongst the research community in the African continent. So hopefully that's supportive of the direction we've taken with this project. So yeah, so the question I would leave you with for later on, and I'll add to these as the other presentations go, really at the moment, we're not really at the stage yet where we can start to ask for comment on the results of this survey because the sample size is so much lower than we want it to be. And we have only sampled such a small subset of our network. So please do be thinking about how we can get greater participation in this survey. And if you have any suggestions for that, then please be prepared to share that with us at the end. So I am going to hand over now to Bismark, and I think Bismark has a pre-prepared presentation that Aaron is going to share for us. Bismark is on the call. I don't know, Bismark, if you are planning to introduce or say anything live. I'll wait till the end. If you have anything to say live, Bismark, then you can go for it then.
Sorry, there was just a bit of a technical glitch there. I'll just reload the screen share and it'll be up in a second.
Hi everyone. In today's workshop, I'll be giving an update on progress made and lessons learned so far on field trials of the trail cameras for phenology monitoring. This is part of the African Phenology Network's COP26 grant funded by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And one of our objectives for this project was to conduct capacity assessment for phenology monitoring, and this capacity assessment included the use of mobile data forms and also field trials for canopy cameras for phenology monitoring. And so this experience was new for all of us. We had some initial discussions on what type of camera to go in for, and we had some bit of consultation, and so we settled on the Bushnell cameras, mainly on the recommendation from the lab of Patricia in Brazil. And the Bushnell cameras look very interesting. They have a feature that allows you to do full scanning and take pictures, a number of pictures within certain time blocks in a day. And so that was the cameras that we settled on. Navigating through the purchases and delivery, international delivery, was quite a bit complex. So you can imagine that enquiries were made on the cameras somewhere in May 2021, and they were finally dispatched in August 2021. So that took quite some time. And when they were dispatched in August, for the documents that I received, they were dispatched around 11th August, and they got to me on 20th August. So it took 10 days in all. And I think a key concern had to do with import duties. Yes, some courier service providers are able to give you the import duties at the point where you are making asking them to deliver. Others are also not able to do that, and so that also made us lose some time. And so in my case, they had to contact me, and I had to say, okay, calculate it and let me know how much it will cost so I can go ahead and make the payment. And that took about 2 days to get back to me. And in Kenya, they are still having some challenge with that. I think delivery in Gabon had to be done in person by someone that was traveling to the Lope field site. So this is how the phenocams, yes, the Bushnell trail cameras, which we are using for phenology monitoring, and so now phenocams, this is how they look, very rugged and robust. And one of the things that my team and I tried in the field was to leave the camera from the treetop and allow it to fall freely and hit the ground. So because that can actually happen, as you'll see in some of the videos to come, that can happen while we're trying to fix these cameras up there. That nearly happened, and the cameras were still very safe and very strong. It has rained a number of times in the places where we've mounted them so far, and they have still worked well. So this here is the lens, and this is the sensor, and these are the low glow flashlights that allow you to take pictures also in the night. But for phenology, we really only need pictures in the day. And this is the menu icon, which is used to navigate through the various options. And when you get to the desired option that you want to make changes in, you click on the E, which is for the set. You use this left and right to navigate through the menu icons, and then the up and down arrow to make a selection of the menu choices. This is the switch. There are three options: off, setup, and on. So if you want to make changes to the settings, you shift it to the middle one, which is setup, and then when that is ready, you switch it to the top position, which is on. And when it is on, a red light here flashes 3 times to indicate that the camera is about to start taking pictures or videos, and then that means that you can hang it and leave it in position, and based on the settings that you apply, it will continue to take pictures. So in setting up the cameras, the owner's manual was very helpful, a number of videos on YouTube, and then we also had a session where Robin Whitecock shared some tips from his personal experience. Although this experience was mainly for monitoring animals, but we also have to use this for phenology monitoring. So we had to basically take tips from there. So for phenology monitoring, we had to set the cameras in, we had to set it in camera mode and not video, and also set a number of photos. In my case, based on the sessions that we had. We set it at 5 photos. So anytime it's going to take a picture at a time that you indicate, it will take 5 pictures at that time. And then there is a full scan option. That is actually what is useful for phenology monitoring, so that it does not have to take a picture when there is a prompt movement from an animal, but then at set times, maybe between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., you indicate that the camera should take 5 pictures within that period. And those pictures should be spaced maybe every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. And so the camera will do that. It's still a bit tricky. It's something that we are still experimenting, learning how it actually works in the field. And you can set time blocks for scanning. There is a time A and then the time block B. And you define the time intervals within which the camera should scan and take pictures. And so for the ones that I put out, I did the morning setting 7 a.m. to 12, and then an evening setting from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. But I still found out the camera was taking pictures in between those periods, and maybe sometimes beyond the periods that you've specified. So it's still a bit tricky, and it's possible and very useful to put timestamp to the images, because this will always be helpful in easily tracking what time the cameras took the pictures. And if you give names to the cameras, and those names can also be stamped on the images, so that it's easy to sort out what pictures are coming in from multiple sites. So having gone through this, then the next important thing to do was to mount the cameras. It was not so easy selecting the right kind of tree, the right tree to mount the cameras on. It had to be a tree that someone could climb, and so we had to contact a tree climber to do that for us. So even when you found a tree that was really tall, because when you have no cranes, no tower, then the best option is an emergent tree that really overlooks the canopy. And so that tree, if it was too huge, was not possible to climb. Our tree climber could not climb those ones. So we had to look for the right kind of tree, and then try and position it at a branch that is not obscured, right? No leaves blocking the view. And so our tree climber here, Anthony, had a camera strapped to him, and he had to climb up here and mount the camera over there on the emergent. And so here he had to get there before turning it on and then hanging the camera. But it can be tricky. So perhaps subsequently what we did was to switch it on before he took it up there, so that we are certain that the camera is on before it's hung up there. So when he gets there, he has a better view than those of us on the ground. And so he positions it in a place where we think that it can give us the best caption of the canopy. Yes, but at the end of the day, also you realize that this wasn't exactly, it didn't really capture it as we wanted. So we left this there for a number of days before we then came back. Okay, so we had to then, after some days, go back and bring this down and take out the memory card from the cameras and try and look at the kind of pictures that we had. And so we realized that the camera, the way it positioned, was facing downwards, and so it could not capture a very large stretch of the canopy as we wanted. And so it was literally just looking down on top of a very small section. So it took this picture at 9 a.m. The next one was at 10 a.m., at 11, and then at 6 p.m. it took this other one. So if you compare, you realize that the pictures at 9 and 10 were better than the pictures that were taken at 6 p.m. And the other camera also, this was a picture taken at 7 a.m. when the sun was coming out, and so this was also not a very good picture. But the one that came at 8 a.m. for second camera was also good. But again, it did not capture the canopy well enough. It had these trees blocking its view, whereas we need a very wide stretch of the canopy to be captured. So it means that the position of the camera was not high enough to overlook the canopy. So apart from taking the pictures, the sensor was also active, and so it captured some animal interactions. There's a black and white colobus monkey, and then the mona monkey also was captured in another instance. So we had to, because of that, change the position and look for other emergents that were accessible. And so this was one of the second emergent trees that we had to, one of two other emergent trees that we had to then switch to really tall. But here, the size of the tree was not good enough for the camera strap. It appears that the strap was shorter. So it means going forward, subsequent times we may need to make adjustment to the strap, maybe get longer strap, yes, or maybe find another way of strapping cameras to the tree. And this was also a third camera that I put up somewhere near my school on the campus of the university. And the tree again was not high enough to give us a good caption of the canopy. If it were tall enough, then you get good images of all these sides. So getting an emergent when you don't have cranes or towers is something that is very important, in my opinion, if we can get a good trail camera. So this was also set to take one picture of the night. We don't really need it, but just to give us a picture of how it will look like. It will not be so useful for phenology. Perhaps it may take note of some interactions, maybe what time some animal or the other visits. Yes, and maybe to that extent. And so this is also information that was shared with us by the team of Patricia Morlato in Brazil. So this is how they have set this up, very innovative. And so the camera can be positioned in a way to overlook the canopy. They are not using the straps, but they have come up with this this kit, this setup to hang it, which is so in our case we have to look at an emergent that has branches, perhaps positioned in this way if you want to use this kind of setup, so that it overlooks the canopy in this way and gives us a long stretch of data. And so again, this is how the feedback that they get, and that is very interesting. So this is the kind of picture that we had in mind, but unfortunately after the setup and trialing it and taking the memory cards out, we realized that we are not getting this kind of image. Yes, thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you, Bismark. It's just brilliant. Like, I think Bismark only got the cameras a couple of weeks ago, so that's just a huge amount of learning in that short period of time. So I think that was hugely useful for me. I've never had my hands on one of these cameras yet, let alone try and use them in the field. So I'm sure that everyone else found that really helpful as well. I'm going to hold off any discussion again about that until the end, and then we'll just have a discussion and a chance to ask questions. There's not so many of us today, so I think we'll just stay all in one room and just hopefully have that conversation together. So if you are starting to have any direct questions to any of the speakers or general points for discussion, then please do write them in the chat. If you prefer to write in French, you can do that, and Hervé can translate for us. So Aaron is going to just speak to us now about the online manuals that we are preparing. But while he's doing that, please do start thinking about things you might want to share or ask, and write that in the chat. I'll hand over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give us all a brief presentation on the, as Emma said, the web manuals that we're developing at the minute. And these are, the idea really came around, as Emma has mentioned, you know, we're going to be collecting a lot of evidence throughout this project in a variety of ways, and already members of the steering group and our network that we know have some experience in phenology monitoring themselves. And some of the key aims of the network and the APN COP26 project itself, you know, we're looking to enable and resource phenology research and encourage standardized data methodologies. And as part of the project itself, we're trying to build an online infrastructure for the network and engage stakeholders, so research users and end users of the research and anyone involved in phenology monitoring. And the web manuals, they're really going to be this resource base that anyone who is involved in or setting up phenology projects can access in order to standardize their data collection with other projects on the African continent. And this is really just in the beginnings of being developed at the minute. So we're really starting with the steering group and what we know here, but it's going to be it's going to be a collaborative resource base. So we really are open to hearing from all of you, and if any of you do have useful content that you think people who are monitoring phenology in sub-Saharan Africa could benefit from, whether it's any of the things here, introductions to new technologies or template data forms, or if there are any standardized methodology protocols already out there, how we can link ourselves up with those. Please do let us know if you have any materials and you're willing to be involved. And as it says on here, we're really keen to keep the resource base very accessible. So where we have the opportunity, we'll try and have things in multiple languages. And if we have videos, you know, we'll have them transcribed. And again, we're open to your suggestions as to how we can keep this as accessible as possible. We'll try and keep PDF copies, downloadable copies of things, just in case anyone is experiencing internet issues. They can have a downloadable form that they can use when they don't have access to the internet, so when they're offline. So I'm going to now share with you what we have so far. Most of it is private because they're draft pages. But let's see. Here we go. So if you give me a second, the Zoom banner's in the way. So if you're looking to find the web manuals, if you go to africanphenologynetwork.online, and you'll see the navigation bar up here. If you click on research, we might end up having a separate tab for the web manuals in the future, but this is where we can find them for now. And this is where you'll find a list of publications relevant to phenology. And if you click this link here, you can also check out, as it says, our online web manuals. And you'll be taken to our introduction page here that just explains basically what I've said to you guys already. It's going to be a growing database, growing resource base, and that these pages are currently in review, but that over the coming months, they will start to take form. And just as an example of a couple of things that we're setting up at the minute, for our field trials, some of the technologies that we're investigating are mobile data forms, so that you can collect data in field using Android or iOS devices. So we have just a page of text here explaining this. And this is really all come from Bismark, not all, but really most of it come from Bismark, from his experience, and he's developed a video, which we have found out is too large to be uploaded to the website. So I think we might upload it to YouTube and then link it to the website. And yeah, we also have, as I mentioned, a text form kind of explaining the contents of the video that people can access to, and links to where you can download the app that you can use for data forms. And then we'll also have a page for if you're using the mobile data forms in the field rather than designing them for a project. I mean, there's not really anything here yet, but we have a couple of videos that have been developed. So again, we'll link those in there and turn them into text. And it's going to be obviously like, as we've mentioned, many more things than that, but it's great to get those started. And we hope that this can help us move forward towards standardizing data collection methodologies and really working together across sites that are already established across Africa.
Fab, thanks, Aaron. Great, so that's our kind of presentation content for the day. This isn't going to be as long as some of the previous workshops, so we've now got sort of 10-15 minutes max if we need to have that long to have any kind of conversation. So I mean, if you're able to turn your video on, then please do if you've not done so already, but please don't let that hold you back if you do have anything that you want to say or to share. I think if you're able to use your hand up function, then I can see if you want to ask something directly. I guess my thoughts kind of coming out of where we're at is that we have started all of the things that we hoped to do during this project, so that's really great. We've made some progress in each of the areas, but even in what we thought amongst us as the steering group was a reasonable timetable, you know, it has taken us longer than we expected for a number of these things to progress. I think in terms of the equipment aspect of things, getting cameras out to sites, I think that's a really interesting sort of partly COVID related thing, that the access to buying some of these technologies directly in country in some of your countries, some of my colleagues' countries, is quite limited. So that's been quite reliant on buying equipment in Europe, and then researchers bringing them with them when they come out to visit. And at the moment, obviously, with complete collapse in international travel, we're attempting to send equipment directly, and actually that's, in my opinion, that's a better way of doing it, in that it reduces the carbon intensity of research, and it doesn't mean that an African colleague has to have a European colleague coming out to bring equipment, because there's no reason why that colleague can't just be running the research program themselves. But the big barrier is getting equipment across those international borders, and we have managed it. The cameras are in Ghana at the moment, so we've managed that in one, but it's just difficult when you're budgeting for projects to actually know how much money that's going to cost in terms of duty charges and shipping charges and things, because they all seem to be quite fluid and quite difficult to kind of pin down. So that's kind of put us back a bit from where we expected, but it's amazing because it shows that as soon as you get the equipment out there, right, like Bismark has already produced loads of content in terms of stuff that we can all learn, and I'm sure is not very far off using it in his own research as well, to be generating data. So that's definitely something which we can't necessarily change, but it's like, how do we work with that in how we design projects going forward so that we can allow time and enough money for that equipment transfer. Again, on the capacity survey, if anyone's got any suggestions for how to advertise the survey further, or incentives to encourage people to complete the survey for us, that would be really helpful to hear. And in terms of the web manuals, like, do people feel that we're going in the right direction with how we're developing these web manuals, or are there other ways that we could be presenting them that would help people to engage with them more going forward? So does anyone else want to share any thoughts or questions? Yes, go for it. Hasanella, we've been emailing, I think.
Yeah, hi, Emma
Hi.
and Aaron. Yeah, nice to meet you online.
Yeah, really nice to meet you.
I had a question about the phenochem. Like, so what phenophases do you expect to see from the phenochems? Is it like the same way you were expecting to see stuff from remote sensing, or do you expect to see like fine grain, like flowering, fruiting of like canopy?
Yeah, I would pass you to Bismarck, but I see that he's left the call. He sometimes has trouble with his connection, so I think in the absence of him, I will try and answer that. So as far as I'm aware, phenocams can be used in lots of different ways. So you could put them on a single branch, focus them on a single branch, and get really fine scale information for leafing, flowering, fruiting. I mean, you can get flower emergence. You could get really fine scale. Or in the way that Bismarck was trying it, you could go for sort of like a drone eye view of the canopy, and it depends on the species, doesn't it? Then, because for most species, you'd be able to get leaf turnover if it was a whole canopy event, but obviously if it's intermittent leafing, that can be more difficult to pick up. Some species do hold their flowers above the canopy and their fruit, so that would be visible, but it's really species dependent. So I would have liked to have, that would have been a great one to have asked Bismarck directly what he was envisaging with that position. That's certainly what our colleagues in Brazil have been doing mostly, and I think they've been looking at landscape phenology, because they obviously go from kind of like a dry savanna ecosystem through into tropical forests, I think, in their research area. And so they've been looking at the seasonality of leaf phenology over the landscape. So as far as I'm aware, cameras can be used as broadly as you want them to. Yeah, so at the moment we are just literally getting our hands on them for the first time and trying to learn about the different logistical constraints in doing that, because we could set up the protocol like Bismarck has learned and say, let's do a drone's eye view, and then actually find that we don't have the right equipment to get up to those trees or to position them in that place. So I think we're doing a mixture of what's the best ideology for standardized monitoring and what's the most practical way of using this technology. Do you have any familiarity, Hasanella, with?
Yeah, actually, yes, not with camera traps, but not phenocams per se.
Yeah.
But I guess he was using a similar camera. And we are actually trying to set up the first arboreal camera trap in Madagascar, but to monitor vertebrates. So there's a similar network that I was talking to you about called the Tropical Ecology Assessment Monitoring Network.
Yeah.
And they're mainly doing ground camera traps. The problem with that, mainly in Madagascar, is that a lot of almost all of the lemurs are arboreal. So we had to, one of my colleagues set up a network of arboreal camera trap in a pilot study 2 years ago, and we're trying to expand that to Ranmafan National Park, and I've been trained, to like climb trees using like modern tree climbing systems, and to set up camera traps. So we've ran into like the similar issues that Bismarck had, like pointing the cameras towards the right direction, not pointing the cameras towards east or west, because that's where the sun comes from and sets. But I was really curious to know like what phenophases he could see from that, because we are having issues to capture images of, let alone like big vertebrates. So I was really curious, like if they were able to see phenophases like fruits and stuff like that.
Bismarck's just rejoined the call, so I don't know, Bismarck, if your connection is good enough to come in on this conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Hasanella was just asking, what phenophases you were hoping to see to capture from the cameras on the emergent trees.
Okay, essentially leafing, fruiting, and flowering, just the occurrence of those phases. Yes, because the idea is that those phases may not be seen from the ground, especially for so we're trying to see if we could capture some of those from the canopy using the cameras.
And did you feel that the resolution of the images when you downloaded them, would have been sufficient to have seen that? Might have lost him again. Have we still got you, Bismark?
Okay, so I lost some of that, but I think you mentioned something about resolution.
Yeah.
So if I would just pick on that and attempt to answer. Yes, so I think the resolution would work best for the leaf phenology, and I think also to some extent for fruit phenology if they are close enough. From just the trials that we did over the past few days, there were no flowers that we were able to spot. Yes, but I think that if the fruits are big enough, the cameras can pick them and leaf phenology. Yes, yeah. And yes, especially if you want to establish what changes occur across the entire ecosystem, then the cameras will work best.
Yeah,
for that.
Thank you. I think there's kind of sort of two aims going along here. Like one is just to increase the experience with these technologies so that people can use them for their own projects in the most appropriate way for their own research agenda. So whether that's training them on specific species or for specific phenophases and just learn how to use them. And then the other aim is to come up with a methodology that could be used uniformly across a number of different sites. And this one needs to work for different species of tree and in different landscapes. So that's probably one where we're going to be wanting more of a landscape-wide view, and probably leaf phenology, right? Because that's going to be more easily transferable between sites.
Yes.
I noticed that Hervé's got his hand up, unless Bismark or Hassanella want to say anything more on that topic.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm happy to try the phenocams. I mean, we don't know when we're gonna be able to travel to Madagascar because of COVID and borders are still closed. But we've had we have a lot of cameras there, and we currently do not have issues like importing cameras. Mm-hmm. And we're happy to try, like at least try 1 or 2 cameras up in the trees and see what we can get from there.
Great. I mean, do you already did you already have like Bushnell cameras there?
Yeah, we have Bushnell and another brand, but I'm not sure I remember the name of the brand.
Yeah.
We've tried like 2 or 3 different brands, and we're going to decide which one suits works the best.
Yeah, great. I know that the team in Brazil have tried quite a few different. They're kind of that's sort of one of the groups that are leading the way for sort of phenocam work in the tropics, and they seem to be really sold on Bushnell. I mean, partly because they can access that. They said they can access that brand within Brazil without having to worry about import logistics and charges, which is obviously what we've faced. So that's part of the issue. Where are you based currently, Hassanella?
I'm currently in Canada, Calgary.
Great. Hervé, should we pick up your...
Okay, thank you, Emma. Yeah, I was just trying to come back with the feedback I'm getting from the team at Lope in Gabon.
Yeah.
Using a phenocamera. And I think they told me that they still have an issue with using camera for phenology as they do with direct observation. But listen to the debate and listen to them. I think the idea of camera right now can be using camera to have like a landscape view. But the question will be about the zoom to get like fruit variation in terms of the production of that. So I still have a question about that aspect. And the second thing that the team at Lope was mentioned is like, are we looking for have camera for each tree or just for the landscape, like to have just a view of the landscape? And the final word that the manager of the team at Lope was saying that I think until now he prefer to have like a combination of phenocam and people on the ground.
Yeah, really helpful points raised there, and that's from Loic Makaga in SCGC in Lope National Park. And they've been using a different brand of camera for a couple of years, and well, not a couple of years, I think just this summer, actually a couple of months, and have learnt, you know, some things already from those cameras, although we haven't had these Bushnell cameras out there for phenocams. They are familiar with Bushnell cameras for animal traps, but not for plant phenology. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if funding wasn't an issue, we could put a camera on every tree we're interested in and get individual level data like we are collecting from the direct observations. And we'd be able to get that at, the advantage of the cameras is we can get it at a finer resolution for a cheaper cost, right, than paying somebody to go out every day and record what's happening with the trees. The idea as well is that we could have greater objectivity, so we're not so hindered when observers cross over with each other, you know, their different biases in how they look at the trees. Although obviously there has to be an expert looking at the pictures to identify the different phenophases. So there is expertise needed in handling these images, and that's something that we as a group haven't gotten to at all yet, and we're hoping that our colleagues at Phenolab, UNESCO in Brazil are going to guide us through what to do with these images as well. So there are some advantages, but yes, the disadvantages are, how do you make this compromise between the individual tree and the landscape, and what do you do when you know, you have this ideal positioning of the camera, but you go to your field site and there isn't anything there to position the camera on above the canopy. What do you do then? You need a flux tower. We don't have any flux towers. Yeah, these are all things that are not going to go away anytime soon. As Bismark, do you want to come in?
Yes, just to add on that. So when we went out to set the cameras, the idea was to try and see if we could fix them in a place that gives us the best view of the landscape, right? A wide stretch of the canopy, so that we can have a view of what changes are taking place in terms of leaf phenology in particular over the period of, say, a year. And if there is mass flowering, then that also can definitely be captured by the cameras. And what the team on the ground was also to do alongside, we tried to guess, okay, which of these trees in this area would most likely be captured by the camera based on where we've positioned it. And so they were also to go to those trees and then try to monitor what is happening with those trees. And so that, as it were, if we extracted the images from the cameras and we could compare what was captured in the canopy versus what was collected in the ground. But the experience in the first few days realized that the trees that we supposed would be in the camera were not captured at all. And so whatever we were collecting on the ground was different from what was in the canopy. So perhaps what may sound very achievable now is to target landscapes, try to find out what changes are taking place across a wide stretch. Like the last picture from the team in Brazil was there in my slide. And to achieve that, we would need either cranes or towers or emergence. Yes, that can really help us take a view of the canopy.
Yeah, and the thing is, if we from what we're learning through this project is what we can use as the evidence if we want to apply for more funding, if we do need other equipment, you know, and we do need to whether it's just employ tree climbers across different sites or whether it's actually bring in I don't know, some kind of craning equipment or whatever it is that we need, you know, actually we've got the strong evidence base for why we need that and exactly what we need. So I think this is all really valuable information that we're kind of gathering together. Does anyone else have anything different that they'd like to raise before I sort of close? Yes, David.
Emma, hi everybody. Hello.
Hello, David. Lovely to hear from you.
Yeah. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Great presentations. I was particularly interested to know about to see the various aspects how the camera can be used, and I think that the challenges will be there. And again, for some of us who are actually looking at agroforest systems, which trees are lower down the ground, and we think, for example, I mean, we are monitoring, for example, leafing, flowering, and fruiting. But again, some aspects like even budding, we can't see them when you go to the field maybe once or twice in a month. You know, you just see flowers popping up, and I think you can mount that on a single tree and have a fine scale focus on a branch or whatever. So I think it depends, you know, on what you're trying to capture, and I think that would be a good point. But again, we'll have challenges. I mean, like Bismarck's situation where they're having tall emergent trees, you know, on the ground. There are other risks as well, and security issues, and these are some of them, some of the things which we might need to consider. But I think generally, and then on the issue of the survey, I think it's a really good survey, and it's a pity that we've only had 19 so far. I did it, and I really don't know how we can move it across to other possible people who can respond. But maybe because I think Aaron and team, probably you sent it to us who are on the mailing list, you know, but I don't know whether it is us also, we can also forward them to some networks and see. But of course, there'll be some kind of bias, because I see some of the response we've gotten, you know, like the answers to do with, who should be responsible in some of these things. We saw researchers and international organizations, but we also need to see the policymakers, funders, and the others. So I don't know how we can distribute this questionnaire to these other groups. So that's how I can see. But I know personally, if it is okay, we can send to some of the networks we work with, you know, institutions, for example, and ask a list and just ask them to do the questionnaire if they are willing to do so. But for policymakers and the others, I really, and the funders, for example, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think both of the topics you've covered there are really useful, David. I know that with the clonal trials in Kenya, I mean, you actually have the towers, don't you?
Yeah.
So there is a possibility of putting, at some of the sites, there are tall towers.
Yes, yeah.
So although the individual like budding and that kind of thing would be missed, it could be interesting to see if you could actually match up individual canopies, you know, with how many you could actually see, and when they're in full leaf, for example, coming in out after the dry season, whether you can use it on a higher resolution, because you could have a daily photo. It could add a different element to the in-person observation, perhaps. But on the second note, absolutely, the survey we very much would like you to share it, and maybe that's something that we need to reiterate. Maybe after this, we'll send out a message around the mailing list again and on Twitter, maybe with a paragraph to help you of information for you to help forward it. I know that myself, with my networks in Gabon, I need to share it further amongst policymakers, because we do have a good crossover in Gabon between policymakers and researchers. So there's a nice opportunity there to pass it around. So I think if we leave it open and we encourage people to forward it, then we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. so just looking at the time, I'm just going to share my screen again just to close with a couple of points. Again, so do keep in touch with us if you are. It's quite difficult to see everyone's names all the time on Zoom. So I don't know if everyone here has been before or if anyone is new to this group, but please do keep in touch, join the mailing list, and we'll send out information after this event to let you know how to do that. There have been some issues with joining the mailing list in the way that we've said. If that's the case, please do email Aaron or the African Phenology Network email address, and we will make sure we get you on the mailing list. There is an opportunity on the African Phenology Network website to add your research site so that other people can know that you exist and can get in touch with you. So have a look at that. We are trying to update that in the next month or so. So we'd be really keen to hear from you, and it's a great way to get other people to get to know you. If you haven't done so, please complete the survey. Aaron has attached the links in the chat here, both in English and in French. You can open those on your browser, and please do share them widely amongst your community. And you can catch up on the previous workshops on YouTube, and this one will be made available on YouTube as well in the coming weeks. So you can either watch back or share it with your colleagues. And we have one more workshop in this series coming up. I think we don't have a date for it just yet because we are a little bit behind schedule, and so we just need to confirm that in the coming week. But that final workshop will really be, even though it feels like we're just in the stage of kind of jumping off with this knowledge, we're going to be trying to kind of come to some conclusions. Just because of the timescale of the project, we need to sort of bring together what we've learned so far into a document for now. So do stick with us if you would like to be part of that, and potentially have the opportunity to have your name on a publication or a policy briefing. Then really we do encourage you to attend the next workshop and be part of that process, and again invite any interested colleagues to that. And yeah, just as Hassanallah did after the last workshop, he got in touch with us and shared information about the research site in Madagascar. That's really, really helpful. And he's shared with us some information amongst the steering group. So do put yourself forward to get in touch with us, to let us know about what's going on in your country or at your research sites. And we can find ways for you to be more involved in the network and help to develop these protocols as we go forward. So thank you very much to everyone for coming again this week, and hopefully we'll see you next month, and be in touch with us in the meantime about anything. Thanks.
Thanks, Emma.
That's no